tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I'm excited to present one of our last live tape shows of the year. And we're going to sum up some of the things that's been going on in the courthouse in Harris County and around the state of Texas for the last month and maybe year if you want to call in and talk about it. I have two distinguished young lawyers in the studio with me tonight. I have Mr. Damon Parrish and I have Mr. Damon Parrish and Justin Harris. Those names almost rhymed. It kind of confused me. I was thinking I did something wrong. All right, and we're going to talk about some interesting things. Let me tell you a few of them. What is really in Damon's craw tonight is affluenza. So that's a new term that we've heard about recently with the case out of Fort Worth. One of the things that I'm excited about as an old seasoned lawyer is the Michael Morton Act. And I think Justin has a few things that's in his craw tonight that he wants to explain and talk to you about. Please feel free to call in and make any comments that you like or ask any questions you like about criminal law. Without any further ado, let's get talking about it, Damon. Tell us about affluenza and why that's, explain it to us, explain a little history of what happened in the case, and let us know about the disparate treatment between different people.
Absolutely. I think we all know that money buys a lot of things. And in this case, we now have in Texas the first documented example of money actually buying justice. All right, so the story is a 16-year-old young man lived a very privileged lifestyle. His family got him whatever he wanted. He, in fact, had his own kind of independent bachelor pad behind his house where he would live with his friends and party and do whatever 16-year-olds would do, plus whatever apparently adults would do. On the night in question, he had his own truck, nice brand new F-150. With his friends, they went to the local store, stole some beer. They're 16, they can't buy it. Already drunk, drove, crashed, killed 4 people, injured 2 more. All right. So he's 16 years old, he's in juvenile court, he's charged with those crimes. His family, being affluent, decided, let's hire an expert psychologist to testify how, hey, you know what? We didn't raise our boy right. They didn't teach him any discipline, any way of understanding his actions and how it impacts people, term dubbed affluenza. Because he's rich, he's used to getting whatever he wants, he can't appreciate the consequences of his actions. That was argued to Judge Janine Boyd. She bought it and decided, you know what, he can't appreciate what he did was wrong. He didn't really understand it. Let's send him to probation for 10 years. His family agreed to send him to a counseling facility in California to the tune of $500,000, where he'll learn how to control his actions, his anger, and how to be a productive citizen. He'll also learn how to horseback ride, have archery there as well. It's prison. It's a hard place to be. It's like a Russian gulag. And from there, you know, he'll go about his life. And the actual term dubbed by his attorneys and psychologists is affluenza, which is a combination of affluent and influenza. You know, he's sick because he's rich. Right? And it's the first documented example of actually being rich being an excuse for being bad.
And because of that, the 4 people, so I'm assuming, though, that it's like intoxicated manslaughter. He's drunk and he killed someone.
Correct.
Things that adults go to prison for.
Correct.
Killed 4 people, including some of his friends. Tell us the disparity in the news with that same judge in Fort Worth giving a black kid or a poor kid or a regular kid a much harsher sentence for less people being dead.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
So the same judge, a African-American youth who was not affluent, and we don't know if he was poor or just not rich, but he wasn't affluent. He punched somebody in the face. And we don't know if that's part of that whole punching game, or they call it knockout game, but he punched somebody in the face. 2 days later, that person died. Right. His attorneys also argued, without the aid of this psychologist, that, hey, he couldn't appreciate his actions. Judge decided, you're right, he cannot appreciate it. And we have a place where he can go, where he can learn to appreciate his actions. That place is called TYC, or, well, it's youth prison pretty much. So he was given 10 years in prison to learn how to appreciate the consequences of his actions. And from that, we can see one youth killed one person, same defense, but he's poor, and so he goes to prison. Another youth kills 4, critically injures 2. So there was a total of 6 people here who was injured by him. Rich goes to California to learn how to ride horses and shoot arrows.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Justin.
One thing I want to ask Damon to do, what we were talking about before, and Damon, you gave kind of a synopsis of a quote from that judge when she was sentencing the African-American young man. Could you kind of say, do you remember what you'd said?
I believe her quote was, and I'm paraphrasing, was, if he doesn't know how to control his actions or be responsible for them, I know we can teach him. And he can get the same programs available in prison.
Okay.
That's pretty much what it was.
Right. And so is your issue, well, my view on that is that the young African-American man got the short end of the stick of this whole thing. I don't necessarily think, now I think we have some issues that arise from feeling like a young white man who's gotten every break in life and some that maybe he shouldn't have, that using that and his affluence as a defense rubs us along the wrong way. But I have the opinion that the young African-American man should have gotten the same break as the white guy should have, because they are young men. I do think that things I did when I was 16, things I did when I was 26, thank God I'm not being held responsible for those still today. But I didn't grow up like either one of those 2 young men probably did. But I think that is where our systems should look, as at actually doing things that will make someone more productive in the future and can have them be contributing to society rather than sitting in a jail or a prison cell just rotting. And I would like to have seen the other young man get some of the opportunities that the rich kid got. But
do y'all believe that it's one of the arguments that I think a rich judge would say, or a judge that's looking at it, is that, well, the rich kid's family is paying for him to go somewhere. I think that's bullcorn, because we as citizens are paying for them to go somewhere too, TYC. Mm-hmm. And it what's good for one should be good for the other. And I think that this is one of the reasons why we need to talk about these things, and why I'm always harping on, we need to vote. We need to get out there and vote. Now, in Fort Worth, are you going to let this judge stay a judge that's going to treat people like that? And let's not see the issue as just white and black, although it is a black kid and a white kid, because majority of white people are not rich. Right. You know what I mean? And they're still going to court. So we want a judge that can see past that and say, even though you're rich, you deserve the same punishment. But we have too many judges who are wealthy or want to be wealthy or look at wealthy people to have different punishments, which don't include incarceration, but it's a rubber stamp, and it's no big deal to send a black kid to prison. Mm-hmm. So much so it's become cultural that we just go to prison, and it's bullcorn. I mean, I would be just as devastated if I had to go to prison as you would, Justin, mm-hmm. as a white kid. I mean, just as devastating, and especially if my kid had to. But it just doesn't seem like judges can see that, and that's one of the things that I just find horrible.
Well, and to piggyback on that, money, like I said, money buys a lot. And I think in this case, this is one of the situations where we all know people with money have better chances in life, better breaks, and a better criminal justice system. But we haven't been so bold as to put a name on it.
Oh my God, it's crazy. But we have a phone call. Caller, thank you for calling Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Please turn your volume down and talk directly into your telephone.
Okay, I actually walked outside. I can hear y'all over the thing. It's just someone.
Hello? Hello? I think we lost you. Let's keep talking.
Right, and it's just to be so bold as to put a name on, hey, you're rich, so you get a better break than us poor folk.
Or make it even the defense.
Right.
To make the central defense around it. And I think that's where a lot of the outrage comes from it. And that has trouble sitting with me. At the same time, we're all defense attorneys. I think that if we were faced with a fact where that was kind of our only defense, the only thing we could hang our hat on, I don't think you would hesitate to do that for your client.
And let me say this to the defense attorneys: kudos. You
Absolutely.
did your job right, and I have no problem with that. And I just have a problem with now we have made a defense only available to the rich.
Yeah.
With no other criteria.
And what bothers me is that this is where this one-sided system of all Republican judges has led to after 20 years. I mean, everything's just bold now because you have no competition. The everyday person doesn't know who they vote for. We have a one-party system in Texas, and there's no fear of this judge of being defeated by a Democrat.
Right.
You know, no fear because we know that the governors have been Republicans, the presidents have been Republicans for the most part. There's all this, negative Hannity and Fox News, and even poor people buy into it, not understanding that when it's time for them to get justice, they have just sold their justice away by letting $40 million commentators, people who make $40 million a year on hate, get richer and influence you to when your child or you go before justice, you can't have a fair break. I think the defense lawyers did an excellent job in the Affluenza to come up with it, to know that this market is bold enough to where I can say my client is special because he's white and he's rich. I mean, that's some bold stuff to say.
It is.
And it's bold that they knew that it would work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what might be backfiring for this judge is that it got national publicity.
Correct.
Because usually we see these kind of things in the courthouse every day. People are getting heralded now there used to be a judge that used to, a black kid came at 9:15, his bond was revoked. A white lady comes at 9:15, she's chastised. He became our DA. I loved him a lot, but I watched him do it in the courthouse. But what could I say? That didn't make national news.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that's...
And now the STAR program is going to be named after him. But I'm just saying he did things that weren't fair. I mean, it's just the bottom line.
Right.
But that's a part of not just Affluenza, but that's a part of a system that has no checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
It has no political checks and balances. Because if there were political checks and balances for these state benches, then judges wouldn't do that because they knew they'd be called out on it. Mm-hmm. The unfairness and the disparate treatment.
And there's also one more thing about this I want to bring up. It is that this is extreme. And this is, even for defense attorneys, we agree, this is just beyond extreme. And because of this, we're going to see probably legislation to combat this amount of extremity, which is going to be...
You're young and naive to say that.
I agree.
I think you're very young and naive to say that, Damon. Who cares? Who cares? The people who care are not in power. Who cares whether influence? You think that Republican senators and state reps in Austin will change a law because a white kid got a break?
Oh, absolutely. I think the negative press involved will change it to where they'll make it tougher on everyday people.
Well, shame on us if we have to legislate a judge's ruling.
Correct.
I mean, shame on us if we have to do that.
And
that's crazy. That the political process should speak where we vote, where it comes out and the people know and they vote. The thing to watch is, and this is where we should have done our homework, is she on the ballot coming up this next term under the governor's race, or is she 2016 with the presidential, and will someone challenge her and bring that up in Fort Worth? Because that's what needs to be done. That's where she needs to get her little hiney spanked. I'm just saying, that's where it needs to be spanked.
I agree, and I think I think you will see someone who challenges at least her in the primary, certainly in the general election, and this will be probably a focal point. But
But check this out: if she's running next year, the last day to file against her was December 6th, so nobody will be challenging her next year if she's there. Let's talk about that. That's why you need to be involved with the political process, right? Yeah. So I mean, if that's the case, she might have waited to do this decision after December 6th.
Mm-hmm. Which right around there.
Hey.
So is she this term or is she next term?
And otherwise, the other thing is, if you think the legislature is going to come back and legislate around this, we have to hope that they remember that in a year and a half, when they're finally back doing their job again, because Texas only lets our legislatures work every 2 years.
Well, the point I was making was whenever a knee-jerk reaction to the public happens on the criminal defense side where we win, we always get some kind of over legislation to stop us from winning.
Exactly.
And that's what I mean. I don't think they're going to overturn this decision. I just mean we're going to get a knee-jerk reaction. The public doesn't like this. And so
yeah, but you're still being naive, Damon, that there's a knee-jerk reaction if the defense wins, but there's not a knee-jerk reaction when someone white wins and somebody rich wins. That's where you're being naive.
As far as
You're being naive, and I appreciate your naivete. I do appreciate that. I appreciate your youth, and I hope that you're right, just because you're just seeing it as the defense wins, the laws are going to be changed.
Yep.
But it's deeper than that. Laws are changed when the defense wins and they were black. And maybe I'm old and what do you call it? Cynical.
cynical.
I'm old and cynical.
I wouldn't say you're sinister anymore.
I'm not sinister. Old and cynical, and I don't want to be. That's just my observation.
And the other thing, keep in mind, along with Vivian saying, is the people who would be voting that legislation in are ones who are going to sit there and think about the fact that they have children who look a lot more like that 16-year-old
Right.
than
that black kid that
regular
got
kids
with the
do.
TYC. So they're going to want judges that still will give disparate treatment to their kid who might run over somebody.
Well, I'm telling you guys, you wait and see. We're going to get an overreaction from the Senate on it, and it's going to make criminal justice for juveniles much tougher than it should be.
Okay.
Are we making bets today? Is that what this is?
We can.
When the cameras are off, maybe.
I appreciate your naivete, and I appreciate your opinion. It's good. It's good. It's good. All right, Justin, what's in your craw?
Well, last time I was on the show, about a month ago, and I'm not trying to beat an old dead horse, we talked about the police department not apologizing to a young man who was arrested wrongfully when he was trying to save young people who were in a house shooting in a house party in Cyprus. And shortly after that, I found a story on a national news site about a young woman she's a white woman. She was 13 years old. Her name was Landry Thompson. She came into Houston from Tulsa, Oklahoma. She's a very accomplished dancer, apparently. And she has 2 dance instructors, both of whom are black, who had her parents' permission, and her parents wanted them to take her down to Houston to train with some very, very well-known dancers in the Houston area and who came in internationally. It was a big to-do that people came in nationally for this deal. They were not from the area, the 3 of them, her 2 instructors and herself. It was very late after a long day of rehearsals and practices, and they were looking for their hotel. The GPS unit they had in their car wasn't working, so the instructors pulled into a gas station to get directions or get the GPS to work. I can't remember what. She was passed out. She was asleep in the back seat, and they were just sitting there trying to figure out where they were going, and all of a sudden, Houston Police Department officers surrounded the vehicle with guns drawn, grabbed all 3, pulled them out of the car, arrested the 2 instructors, and also kept the 13-year-old girl in custody for, I believe, over 24 hours in the juvenile system until while they had a notarized note from the parents that they provided the police officers showing where her dance instructors were just bringing her down here for, basically like when I was in school and I went on a field trip overnight for student council or for debate, and my debate teacher or my student council teacher or sponsor was in charge of us. And these people, the only thing that anybody can determine to explain this was that it was 2 black men with a very young white woman, or girl in this case, a 13-year-old in the car, and that was the only reason why these people were harassed and treated this way. They're very clearly their constitutional rights were very seriously violated, and all they want is an apology also. And Harris County Sheriff's Office and HPD apparently are sticking to their "we don't apologize for things we do wrong" policy. So.
And to add to that, it was also at nighttime, and the police called that little girl's mother. And said, "Hey, you know where your daughter's at right now?" She says, "Yeah, she's in Oklahoma with the dance instructors." And so they knew about it, and still, they still detained her.
That's what's crazy. They have a notarized note. They've talked to the mother, and the police still know more for this child's welfare than the mother and the person that they called on the telephone. That's crazy.
What else do you need?
What else do you need?
I have trouble believing we're not living in a police state.
We are in a police state.
When the police can come and just yank you out of the car and completely disregard
They completely destroy your life.
Yeah.
A child who's been cared for and is probably affluent also, who has dance instructors bringing her down, and now she has to be in a juvenile detention with kids who, are raping people, who are doing all kind of crazy, selling their bodies and doing drugs, and you have completely done everything that you can do as a mother. That's the craziest thing I ever heard of, and it only happened because she was white and the guys were black.
And her mother even said that I knew where she was, who she was with, she was safe, and she was with safe people. Now, the police came in, and now she doesn't know where her daughter is, who her daughter's with, or if her daughter's safe.
Right, right.
So-
Once the mother, the mother now doesn't know what facility she's in, because once you get in police custody, you don't know where the hell your child is. You can't call a phone number.
Yep.
But before, she could have called the child's number and the 2 instructors' numbers. Now you don't know where the hell your kid is. You don't know if they're safe. Whatever phone number the police officers called the mama on, they're probably not answering it now because they're pissed off because their hunch is wrong.
Right.
Because they're so busy now trying to make their hunch be right and put a kid in the system, and it was just crazy. It was crazy. How did it end? Do you know?
I know that everyone was released. I don't know. I haven't read any follow-ups as far as, the criminal records that those 2 men are going to have on whether they can get those expunged, if they're going to have to pay money to hire an attorney to erase these records in an out-of-state, or what the charges were levied against them, if any. I don't know. I don't know if any civil lawsuits came from this, but I do know that at the time, about 3 weeks or so ago, it made some national news where I read it.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. That's an interesting story to share, too.
And these just seem to have more and more and more of these stories. And
Yeah, it's like we're in a police state. That's what's crazy. I mean, when I was a kid, you could go to a bar with your father, and, if he's drinking or whatever, kids could go in. As long as you're with your parents, it didn't really matter. Now it's like everything is just so legislated. It's worse than it's ever been, actually.
And,
everybody's just so reactionary.
And if memory serves correctly,
And judgmental. Not only are people reactionary, they're judgmental. It's like, I know what's best for your child. I know what's best for you. And that's the part that's crazy. We don't give people their own civil liberties. You have a right to make a mistake in your rearing of your child, in your reactions with people. As long as I'm not harming you, you have a right to spank your children, to discipline your children, as long as you're not starving them or something like that. But, I mean, people are just too involved in other people's households.
and to me, this is an example of society's created a norm of what we think is normal. It's not normal for a white 13-year-old girl to be with 18-year-old, 19-year-old black men. Therefore, there's a crime. If it's not normal, there's a crime. I don't know what the crime is yet, but I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
And I think that's what happened here. Society said this is not normal, therefore there must be a crime. There cannot be an explanation for this that makes sense. There cannot
And
be
the
a
thing is,
rational
let me just say
explanation.
this. The investigation of it is fine. I think that's good policing.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think to see something that looks suspicious, for the police officers to follow up. But once they saw that notarized form, once they called the mother on the phone number that's on the notarized form and she answers it, I mean, what more can you do? Was the mother supposed to send a copy of her ID card? I mean, I don't know what else to do. I mean, even if the cops were worried about it, take all their phone numbers, copy the form or something, detain them for 30 minutes, just long enough to do a reasonable investigation. And from there, let it go. Give them direction. Follow them. I mean, you're on the street, you're patrolling anyway. If they say they're looking for their hotel, follow them to the hotel, because 9 times out of 10 they're going to have a reservation, and they're going to be a dance instructor, and there's going to be other dancers there because they're here for a national dance seminar probably or competition.
I agree.
So,
And like I said, it just wasn't normal. So therefore, it must be a crime. And I think that's another example of just things that we prescribe that if they're not normal, and we don't like it, we have to find something wrong with it. And to your point about investigating, let's face it, it's kind of what happens. So a lot of times cops investigate to find what they're looking for, not to find the truth.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened.
And that's the problem. I mean, that is, in my view, I don't know when it happened, and I'm only 31 years old. I can't say how things were 80 years ago, but we had this notion that a while back, police were more like, Andy Griffin. They were there to protect and serve. They wanted to get down to what was really going on. They wanted to help people. Now it's just like you said. They investigate to find a way to make the crime stick, or to find that there was a crime. Not, hey, maybe these people, maybe there's something going on here that's bad. Let's take 15, 30 minutes. We don't need to pull our guns out. We don't need to start yanking people out of cars. Let's just figure out what's going on. And then when we find out that these people were just lost, let's help them find where they need to go.
yeah, where are you trying to go, and let's guide you there.
Yeah,
What happened to that?
What happened to serve, right?
Right.
What happened to serve? I mean,
serving part.
if they knew where they were trying to go, I mean, I think that they would have realized if they said, I'm trying to find the Holiday Inn Northwest or Holiday Inn downtown, then I think they would have realized and gone and seen that they had reservations. I don't think there was going to be a problem.
It would have taken 5 minutes. They
All
wouldn't have to
right,
even
right.
follow
It would
them.
have
They
been
could
better.
just phone
It would
call.
have taken shorter than it took for you to admit a child into juvenile detention.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think of the paperwork that's required in that and the time that it takes to do that.
Absolutely.
And to arrest and book those guys. I mean, it would have taken a lot less time to do that. Let's talk about it's in my craw is the Michael Morton Act that becomes law January of 2014. Which one of you young, great, fabulous lawyers wants to start that discussion?
I think we both are pretty well versed in it. Damon's kind of been
We can
chomping
start
at the
it.
bit on that.
Okay.
Michael Morton is an example of innocence delayed and very tragic. Michael Morton spent 25 years in Texas prison for a crime he didn't commit. And that crime was murdering his wife. And as a married man myself, I cannot imagine a worse fate to lose my wife than to be accused of it. My children not know me because I spent 25 years now in prison, so I haven't seen my children. And have everyone think I murdered my wife, in this case, in a very, very tragic way. But thankfully, through the Innocence Project, they were able to exonerate him with DNA evidence, which unfortunately is becoming more common. It's a very common thing to hear now. And through his story and the stories of others who unfortunately passed away, they passed this new discovery bill, which now requires the DA's office and their agencies to give us information and evidence that they were required to under Brady, but if they didn't, nothing really happened. Now we have some meat. We have protection from the legislators saying, you must give us offense reports. You must give us this. And you have to do it. It's not at your discretion, and if you don't, we have remedies available to us that aren't like that extremely high burden of prosecutorial misconduct. It's like, now we have things we can do. And you can go to jail. We have ways of making you give us what we want, and if you don't do it, there's no more slaps on the wrist. There's no more like, whatever. It is required by law, and I think that will make for a much better judicial system because there's no more hiding of the truth or the evidence.
And part of that came from, in Michael Morton's case, the prosecutor, who was a Williamson County district attorney at the time, 27, 30 years ago. His name was Ken Anderson.
Right.
He was later, while this case was going on, elected to be a judge in Williamson County, Texas. He hid it was a bloody bandana that was found outside the house. He hid that from the state. He hid big portions of the defense, big portions of the police report from the defense. And then when appellate attorneys came on the case, when the Innocence Project first got involved, they were still trying to hide this bloody bandana. And finally, they turned it over, and they tested it, and it was somebody else. And interestingly, the man who was somebody else, they found in Austin, and about 2 or 3 years after Michael Morton's wife was killed, he killed someone else. Yep. So not only do you have Michael Morton's life being ruined because the police fixated on one person, just like we were talking about earlier with Ms. Thompson from Tulsa, the police want to make a way to make that crime stick to that person rather than just objectively looking at the things, figuring out what the facts are, and going forward from there. And another young woman lost her life, and another family's life was forever altered because the police focused on not the murderer, and this other person got away and was out free for decades.
And in fact did kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so if the police would have done their job, then
potentially would have had one.
That other person would not have been killed. And Michael Morton would have been able to raise his kids and his family and properly grieved his wife. Can you imagine being in prison for something you didn't do? One of the other things I thought was tragic is they withheld, the prosecution withheld his son saying that it was not daddy, it was a monster.
Monster with a mustache.
A monster with a mustache.
Correct.
And when they went back to look at how that man looked back then, he looked like a monster with a mustache. He matched that description. And the daddy didn't have a mustache. So they showed his picture, how the man looked back then, because like I said, he'd been booked a few years later. And so they saw the way he looked. He was a drifter. Yeah. Now, the thing is, a lot of times, murders are some of the most unsolved crimes. And so I guess police don't want to just admit that. It might not have been solved until he killed the other woman, 2 or 3 years later. Then it might have all fit because it might have been the same modus operandi. But I wonder if it was in that same area, if the police didn't wonder if that guy did it. You know what I mean? Sometimes when people drift in and drift out, it was just awful. It was an awful tragedy, but thank God we're having a law passed to try to make sure this a tragedy like that doesn't happen again.
This is one of the best, from what I've been able to hear and to read, this is one of the best discovery laws in the country for defense attorneys.
Let me tell you what the write-ups say. This is the first significant reform in Texas discovery law since 1965.
Wow.
Since 1965. It's since, Brady versus Maryland. And one of the differences in contrast in system, if y'all do any federal work, is in federal court, which I love this about federal court. Part of discovery in federal, have y'all done federal cases?
No, I haven't done my own.
Well, part of the deal is you actually meet with the prosecutor and the police officers. So it's not any hiding. If the police officer's hiding it, the prosecutors, they're not in it, because you have an opportunity to talk to that police officer in your discovery meeting about what they've discovered, what happened, because you say, like, if it's a dope case and the officer's doing surveillance and Justin's the prosecutor. And when it's discovery time and I filed my motion, we actually set a meeting up. All the officers involved in it come in, and if officers bring pictures, like I was watching your client and I had a GPS set up, so I knew where he was because I had GPS on his phone. I was listening to the phone calls. I was watching. He can say, he went in and out with this duffel bag. He did this, he did that, and the prosecutor's just sitting there. But he's telling you what he did, what the other people in his team did, and it's just about irrefutable.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you go back to your client, and they're available for more meetings. So you can go out to your client and, say, this happened last time this happened, my client was in Baltimore. I get to call him on the phone, talk to him, or put him on Skype, and we all talk together. Another thing that the feds will do is they'll have something called show and tell, where you can bring your client in, he can listen to everything, and the agents will present, this is what we're going to do. So it's better than a report. They're going to tell you and show you everything they're going to do. It's called show and tell. And so then you have an opportunity to go back with your client in a couple of weeks and decide, do you want to deal with that, or do we have an answer for those things to show why you're not guilty? Now, they actually follow Brady versus Maryland, and that's the Supreme Court case that anybody can Google that says that you can't hide anything, otherwise you're penalized for it. It gives teeth to our discovery laws. But that's the way the feds execute Brady versus Maryland. Now, what our prosecutors can do in state court is what? Get to court, statements come up, res gestae statements come up. They say your client said that's not in the police report. Pictures come up that you've never seen before. And all of a sudden you have to try to defend that in court, which violates all discovery laws and the essence of Brady versus Maryland. So, and they can just say, well, I didn't know, he just brought it to me today. And that's wrong. I mean, it's wrong, and it's wrong that our same state judges who have no checks and balances allow that to happen. And it's because there's no checks and balances.
Correct.
And feds, they're supposed to be good people, and they try to follow the law.
And with Brady, a lot of times I've seen they'll say, oh, it was in the file. The defense attorney has a duty to go check the file, and it was there. You should have went and saw it. And with the Michael Morton Act, that's not enough. It's not enough that it's in the file and you can come look at it whenever you want. You have to give it to me. So if you got it, I get to see it.
Another problem with this in the file is I've had serious cases where I've gone twice a week for a month and the prosecutor won't come to the door. They're not there. You can't break in. They're behind locked doors.
Right.
And so if you go to the receptionist and they said, oh, well, she's not here, or she's not here today, or she doesn't want to come out, or she's still in court, you can go every day for your appointment and they never give it to you. So it's not an open file. If you can't access, you can't even get to their office, you can't even get to them. So that's what's so significant about the Michael Morton Act.
I agree.
Is that they have to actually give it to you and check off and make you sign for it.
I agree. And I support it. I think it's great. And I think it's...
But I do wish that in important cases that we still had a meeting with all of the investigating officers in state court. Because there's no problems. I mean, there was Loretta Johnson Muldrow just did a big a death penalty case, and I can't remember. Let's just hypothetically say it was 10 years old. The guy's been on death row for 10 years, and one of those rich New York law firms, is doing the federal writ pro bono. Went through the discovery process and found out that something very significant in the case that proved his innocence was never turned in by a police officer. The police officer still had it in his garage, in the closet, and said he never brought it because the prosecutor never asked him to.
Which doesn't make sense because
and the police officer's an honest man. It's a prosecutor's husband. It's a prosecutor right now, chief prosecutor's husband, Marie Prim. That's her husband. Her husband, when asked the question by the federal writ lawyers, said yes, that evidence exists, and yes, I have it, and no, the defense lawyer or the prosecutor, Vic Weisner, did not ask me to bring it, but he knew it existed.
But police officers aren't supposed to be discretionary on what evidence they turn
Exactly.
over.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, and that would be a good show too. And it was in the 351st, and the prosecutors did the right thing, the writ prosecutors, and they went and brought to the judge to sign, sign an order of release. It never made a lot of press, and that was just this year.
Okay.
In fact, I need to try to develop that story to see if I could get Loretta to come on and tell that story.
Yeah, that needs to be released. I mean, even under Brady, there's an obligation to turn it over.
But I'm just saying that the prosecutors allegedly don't ask the police officer. But I agree. It's a lot of times when we go to court, we ask for things that's in the police officer's file, but the prosecutors don't have it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that shouldn't be. Everything that they have, they should be turning over, especially in the day of in this electronic age that we live in.
Right.
Especially because everything can be scanned in, downloaded,
5 minutes.
email to the prosecutors, email to us. There's no reason for us not to have that evidence properly cataloged and dispersed.
I had a case today I was reading the police report on. It's a relatively straightforward DWI. My client's accused of being on drugs when he got it. Reading through the police report, and it's a DPS trooper who are supposed to be some of the most well-trained and educated officers in the state of Texas. He has the blood drawn at a police station, and then 3 days later he goes to pick it up, and he says, I pick it up and I transport it and I keep it in my home office refrigerator.
Oh my God.
And I thought about that for a second, and I was like, wait. He took my client's blood that supposedly have samples of drugs in them to his house, and he put it in his fridge. We've got some things that police officers need to just kind of start thinking a little bit more before they do these things.
Well, and there's a policy for that, and I'm sure that does not follow the protocol.
I'm going to be looking into that.
Right.
That does not follow the Let me just tell you, Justin, that does not follow the protocol, and
I'll
it should
remember
be
that.
thrown out because of that. Let's talk about the no refusal weekend. Damon, you had some different insights, and you and Justin, as young, learned, read all the law, tell everybody everything. Let's talk about what that actually means to people when we hear all the advertisements about no refusal weekend when you're drinking and driving.
Sure. When I hear no refusal weekend, I think of, show me the beef. I think of eat more chicken. Those are just advertising slogans. That's all it is. You have the absolute right to refuse. And I tell all my friends, no refusal doesn't mean you cannot refuse. In fact, you should refuse. It's just a advertising ploy to convince you that if you get pulled over this weekend and we ask for your blood, you got to give it to me. And that is not the case. It is not the law. You have an absolute right to refuse, and neither, thankfully, state legislator or Mayor Parker can't take that away from you. If you get pulled over for a DWI and they ask for your breath or blood, I am telling you, you should refuse.
All right, how do you feel about that, Justin?
I agree. If you get pulled over for DWI and they pull you out of the car, the moment a police officer says, have you had anything to drink tonight?
Yep.
Whatever your answer is, if the next thing is, go ahead and step out of the car for me. At that point, you are going to go to jail.
Absolutely.
If you're in Harris County, Texas. There's nothing you can do. You can be a ballet dancer and do perfect pirouettes. You're still going to jail. My advice, and I think Damon and probably Vivian will agree with me on this, at that point, you need to keep your mouth shut. Be very respectful of the officer because you're being videotaped and audio recorded, and just say, politely, officer, I decline to do any field sobriety tests because you don't have to do those either. Most people don't know that either. You don't have to provide a breath sample, and you do not have to consent to providing a blood sample. Now, they will likely, on these no refusal weekends, go get a judge to sign a warrant and take your blood. The police officers will pressure you because they don't want to have to do their job and go fill out affidavits, go find a judge who will sign a search warrant to take your blood. But that's what our constitutional rights are. And as long as we stand on those rights, we still have them. When we start giving them away, then eventually courts are going to start doing like they've been doing and saying, well, then we don't have to have a warrant to go get blood in these kind of cases, or we don't have to have a warrant in these cases.
Let me tell you what's troubling. You just brought up something very interesting about what the courts are and standing on our rights. Thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things I've discovered, over the last 20 years is that the best opportunity to win a case is in trial. That's why I've been such a trial dog for all these years. Not because I want to be, but I just see no justice other than that original constitutional right to have 12 jurors. I just see nothing else because I did appeals for years. I mean, it's just like writing the best term paper you've ever written, the best research project you've ever done, and making an F every time. You're going to make an F as a defense lawyer every time. And if you have an ego, like Beyonce says, such a big ego, how can you do that? How can you understand the law? How can it be written there? I mean, there hasn't been laws written for the defense since the 80s. And I was talking to a public defender, Sarah Woods, in appellate, since I had this big 25 to life trial going on this week. Where I was really worried, thought I was going to lose. And just really, really worried. I hadn't been that worried. Well, I worry about everybody, but anyway, I was worried that I was going to lose. But anyway, I'm talking to one of the appellate lawyers while the jury's deliberating, and she says, Bob Wyckoff, the head of the public defender's appellate division, did statistics on how often how cases get reversed.
Yes.
1%.
Yeah.
Really?
Maybe 3. Let's say 3%. Okay, I think she said 1, but let's just, because I might have heard 3 swirling around somewhere, 3% of all cases. So if it's 1,000 cases, what's that, 3? Or 30? 30. Okay, if it's 100 cases, 3. But check this out. Check this out. If it's 100 cases where people are found guilty and sent to prison on an appeal, only 3%. But 2.5% of those were prosecution appeals.
Wow.
So those were motions to suppress, because the prosecutors have very limited right to appeal. So if there's a motion to suppress, we're saying that my client's rights were violated. Say a traffic stop, and we say that they were illegally pulled out of the car and searched in violation of their constitutional rights to be left alone. The judge disagrees with the defense, which is rare, and says yes, their rights were violated. Throw the dope away. Doesn't count against them. The prosecution, in that very rare instance, gets to appeal that decision. Well, 2.5 of those reversals were their reversals, not ours. So when it came to just pure defense reversals, it was less than 1%.
Yep.
Wow.
About 50.5% of all. So that tells a one-sided system that's been one-sided Republicans for 20 years that everything you're doing is right. Or it also means that the appellate judges are their friends and they can't tell them they did anything wrong.
Right.
And the few cases that are reversed, there are going to be police officers that got convicted. There are going to be people who are Tom DeLay out of Austin that got convicted. It's going to be politicians or someone with a title that might have gotten convicted. Those are the only time that they get reversed. So just think of how one-sided a system is. Because, one of the things our clients always say, oh, we can appeal it. You can. But with the ratio of 0.5% being overturned, and it got dismal, because even with the 3%, once it got to the Court of Criminal Appeals, if it had to do with the defense, and say the Court of Appeals reversed for the defense, then the Court of Criminal Appeals took it back to where, back to the conviction.
Let them give it a fight.
So our Court of Criminal Appeals and our Court of Appeals are just getting paid for nothing. It's all they're doing is rubber stamping. It got so bad 10 years ago when I used to do a lot of appeals that, as a defense lawyer, when you write your appeal, your appellate's brief, and you cite the points of error in the trial, you send it to your client. The state has 30 days to write their brief, okay? When they get their brief saying why the court was right, then you have to send that to your client. They'd be long, 30, 40 pages, whatever. I got to the point where I wouldn't even read them anymore. Why read that and you can just wait for the actual appellate opinion to come out? That's going to be 3 pages.
Right.
So it's going to summarize the state's brief.
Exactly.
No, I copied it and sent it to my client so they could have some interesting reading. But I didn't even waste my time to read it, because it's just all the Court of Appeals is going to do is summarize what the state's brief is into 3 or 4 pages.
Right.
So why read 40 pages? Because whatever the state did was right anyway.
Right.
And that's just wrong. That's just wrong. It's just wrong.
So basically, the only way to win an appeal is to suffer from affluenza.
Right. Suffer from affluenza.
And then you'll be okay.
Then you'll be okay. Well, you won't go to prison anyway.
No, you
I mean,
right.
a kid that
Be
kills
there.
4 people, their parents are not going to let them go to trial, because regular everyday Joe Blow is probably going to send you to prison. Jurors are probably going to send you to prison, because they're going to relate to the crying parents who are on the stand whose kids are killed. And although they might not want to send affluent Jimmy to prison, they're looking at all these other affluent kids who got killed.
Right.
Unless the kids' parents get up there and say they want him to have probation. Now that could change it.
And I'd be interested to see, whenever her re-election comes around, if Judge Boyd gets any contributions from little Jimmy's parents, affluent Jimmy's parents?
I think Judge Boyd already got contributions from
so?
Little Jimmy's parents, so they don't have to do it again later. I think she already got that.
Okay,
So,
all right.
And that's just a gut reaction. It's not anything documented, is
Oh
it?
no, that's just me visceral being mean and saying, yeah, I think part of the 450 went to his rehab and another 450 went to the general election for all good judges in Fort Worth, Judge Boyd. You know,
Now
so,
you're not sounding naive. Now you're sounding pretty cynical.
I mean, tell it like it is. I'm a truthful person.
Okay.
I also want to say one other thing as far as race goes in the Michael Morton Act. About the same time that Michael Morton was released after a wrongful conviction because of prosecutorial misconduct, we had another man, Anthony Graves, who was a black man, who was also released. And I think the Michael Morton Act is wonderful. He was chosen, the law was named after him because he's a white man. He was wrongly accused of killing his wife. It's something that makes a good public interest story. I'm not in any way diminishing what Mr. Morton went through or Mr. Graves, but it makes it a little bit easier for the legislature. And Rick Perry, there's pictures all over the internet of Rick Perry grinning real big while he's signing the Michael Morton Act with Mr. Morton standing right behind him and Anthony Graves standing over here. And they needed a white face to put on this so that everyone could stand around and rally around him. And I think that we are continuing to see this common trend of kind of different justice systems for people. And I think the Michael Morton Act, while it'll apply to everyone, or it should apply to everyone, for every Michael Morton, there are many, many more Anthony Graves right behind him, I believe.
Absolutely. And you know, Justin, it's funny you said that because I was thinking that. But I didn't want to be
You
that
didn't want to be the guy to say that?
It's because he's
But you
white.
know what? But the thing is this is the thing. This is the thing. We have our own.
was, though.
We have our own format. We can talk about this, and as young lawyers, we need to talk about this race thing more. It's uncomfortable, and white friends completely jump to the defensive, and it's awkward and uncomfortable while us having these conversations. But we got to have these conversations.
White people need to be having
White
these
people have to have these
conversations. And I try to have them with my family and my friends. You want to talk about uncomfortable stuff?
They
That's
don't
when
wanna hear it.
They don't want to talk
They
about it.
don't wanna hear it.
And then I become the problem for just trying to engage people with, trying to be thoughtful in conversation.
You become the black sheep.
Well,
There we go.
He didn't want to say that.
no pun intended.
But the thing is, you young black and white lawyers need to talk about this. So hopefully when y'all become the judges and you become the state representatives, you become the state senators, you have the passion and the intelligence to change this. Well, and you need to have these conversations with your friends. And hopefully we have these conversations because, I don't think our generation is going to do anything about it. I think we're stuck.
Really?
We're stuck. I mean, we're stuck with the uncomfortable conversations. I mean, I do this show, and people are not comfortable with me in the courthouse. I mean, because the judges are my contemporaries. They're the people I was prosecutors with. They're the white power structure, and they're not happy with me running for judge, wanting to be fair. Not happy with me talking about what's going on. It's like airing dirty laundry. They don't like me.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're going to try to have a meeting of the minds with me or change anything. Luckily, they respect me because they know I work hard. But in terms of a conversation, I don't think we're going to have that.
But
you're doing your job right.
But I'm hopeful.
In the end, like you, Vivian, I'd rather be respected than liked.
Yeah.
So, you have that.
Certainly, depending on who the person is that wants to like me or not.
That's true.
Right. So what do y'all think we can do about this? So I'm hoping y'all do something about it. As young lawyers, what do you think, Damon, that you can do to right some of these wrongs?
I think a lot of things, it just takes time and open dialogue and time. Acknowledging there's an issue, but that's not always the issue. It's certainly not always race, but just the time and camaraderie, hanging out, getting to know. The best way to overcome things is to see that we have a common bond more than just race, right? And I think as we grow and as we work together, because certainly I will say it's gotten better, I would hope, right? So my grandmother's stories and my dad's stories aren't my stories, and hopefully my daughter's stories will be much better than my stories. So I believe just in time and
Let me ask you a hard question. If you were the judge, would you have the courage to administer justice fairly? Whether they're affluent and white or poor and black, would you have the courage to do that?
I believe so, because as a person who's experienced, not just because I'm black, but also because I'm a man, unfair circumstances, I would like to believe that I wouldn't be overly prejudiced for black people or overly prejudiced against white people. I would like to believe that I would be fair because that's all I want for myself. I don't want to be judged for anything other than the quality of my work, and to quote Martin Luther King, the content of my character. So I would like for me to be what I want other people to be for me. So I would like to think I'd be fair.
What about you? Let me pose that same question to you, Justin. If you became the judge, would you be able to be fair no matter what?
Well, I'd like to be when I become judge, but I'd like to think I can. I mean, everyone would say, yes, I can be fair. What I didn't know the other case from Judge Boyd about the young African-American man who was sent off for even.
Because it's been in the black news, maybe.
Okay, all right.
I heard it on Magic 102. I've heard it in. Is that where you hear it?
That's what I heard.
So that's why a lot of times
Okay.
we as black professionals listen to black news. That's a black radio station out of Dallas. They told both sides of the story. They
Okay.
told what else she did. That's not going to be in the white media.
Okay. Well, and I'm not going to say what radio station I've been stuck on. I've been trying to get in the Christmas spirit, but I haven't been listening to news radio like I usually do, and I don't have TV. But I would like to think that I would get creative with some of my sentences. And you know what? Affluent Jimmy, your parents are going to spend $500,000 on this treatment facility wherever you're going to learn whatever you were talking about. But you're also going to pay for not affluent Johns to go do the same thing.
Right.
And I would like to see some creative things like that rather than just rubber stamps of plea bargains where you're cycling through mostly young black men through a system. Get a little creative, judges, and I would like to do that. We were going to talk about personal bonds and how very few and far between they are in Harris County. And I would like to think I would get more creative with those things rather than strapping somebody with an interlock device on their car or making someone get drug tested when they're there for a criminal trespass case. Get creative in ways where you don't destroy people's lives, or at least cause clients like mine who are great students and all of a sudden have to drop out of school because they have to pay for all these probation fees, and they have to get a second job and quit school.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The judges they say, well, I'm sorry, this is the type of offense that they have, and this is what I do in those offenses. I don't really care who the person is. And so I like to think that I would treat my people in front of my court, if I were a judge, like I do my clients. Individual by individual basis, see them as people and not as just a case.
I like it. I like it.
So let's ask you, Vivian. I mean, you're probably out of the three of us, the only one with a real chance of being a judge. So
No, I think I'm the one that doesn't have the chance. That's why I'm talking to you, trying to stimulate you. I obviously wouldn't be afraid to administer justice the way I think. I think at my age, if I got the honor of having that job, that would be what I would do. I would be creative, but I would be fair. I don't think that anybody belongs in prison. And one of the things Affluenza's parents probably said is he doesn't belong there.
Right.
But that presupposes that the black kid does belong there, and nobody belongs caged. I mean,
Right.
man's desire is to be free. Nobody's supposed to be caged. Now, I think there are some people who intentionally kill people or have mental illnesses where they do need to be caged. I'm not sure it's prison. It might be a mental hospital, but it needs to be caged so they can be kept away from other people. But I wouldn't be afraid to do what I think is right. And I think I'm mature enough to have seen enough situations to do that. I don't think I'd always be right, but I think I'd be more thoughtful of the community and the community's resources than the current administration.
I think so too.
I agree. So, I voted for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not planning on running anymore, but I do want to support those who do. I think my time is come and gone, but I am hopeful, and that's why I'm trying to encourage you guys to be more thoughtful and to think about those tough decisions. I think it's tough to be a judge and to make a lot of those decisions that they make.
It is.
And it's easier to put your foot on and administer justice with people who don't vote for you, don't look like you. And those are the uncomfortable conversations that we need to have. Because we need to, because the thing that's so naive to me is a lot of our clients, poor clients, really come thinking the judges are going to be fair. They really have not caught up to the last 25 years as the way it's actually, well, last 20 years, I guess that's the way it's actually been.
And it's not even just judges, it's prosecutors.
Oh, yeah.
I have a client I'm trying to get home before Christmas, and not because he necessarily wants to be with his family, that's an issue, but his job has said, which is the first job he's had since he's cleaned his life up, his job has said, if you get out before Christmas, we've got tons of work, we'll let you keep your job. He's been locked up for over 2 months now, and the DAs we are in court on Tuesday. A new DA is going to be on the case. I said, let's just come back on Friday to try to get this wrapped up before the holiday. And I talked to the new DA on the case today, and she's just not going to have time to look at the case.
Wow.
So I'm going to have to be the one that talks to my client about that when I've been doing everything I can. And the prosecutor just, I understand her position, but at the same time, she doesn't understand my position and doesn't even really seem to want to, or my clients. So.
And that's that's the tragedy of Harris County. It takes a year to get to trial. It takes 6 months to dispose of a case, and people are just supposed to be in jail. People that are working and going to school because you don't have time to look at their lives. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest parts about being a defense lawyer is explaining that they don't have time for you, and there's nothing we can do about it until they have time to look at your case. That's the
hard
tragedy.
to tell someone.
It's hard. It's hard to tell somebody that.
Which is why
They think it's your fault. Oh, the lawyer just reset it again. And that's one of the things that if I became a judge, I was going to do is change it and make it more like federal and have a scheduling order where clients only had to come in when it was a meaningful setting. Otherwise, just let the lawyers come in and go through the discovery. And you don't need the clients there if they're not going to plead. If you want to set it for a plea, then put it on a plea date and have your client come in and plead it. But they don't have to be there for that. Just come for pretrial conference trial, and if you're going to set it for a plea. But all those dates every 2 weeks and every month, and being like a police state to be on bond and have to pee every week, it's crazy. It's crazy.
That's why I really support Mr. Rob Fickman and his efforts with this pretrial situation, because I've definitely had clients who I really believe their case should have been tried. But they're sitting in jail on a misdemeanor case or whatever have you, and they just don't want to sit in jail for 4 months while their case comes up.
Well, y'all can still be the legislators and make it if someone has a conviction for 5 years, 10 years, it can be expunged. I mean, the laws are written. I mean, somebody can change them. It doesn't have to be the way it is.
That's true.
And what young lawyers do a lot of times is you come in, you learn a system, you become a judge, and you just regurgitate the same things, not realizing that these things have expiration dates. They have amendments. I mean, why should in the age of electronics and everything, every time you go to court, it's on a computer that's open to the world. Why should that be open to the world? When people use that against you, why should it be? It shouldn't be. It should be automatic. Dismissal should be automatically taken off your record. It shouldn't be something you have to pay for.
Now you're having to pay private websites to take your picture down.
Right.
And they're just extorting money out of you.
Right.
And so people are figuring out different ways to make money from a miscarriage of justice.
Right. And why did our legislators let them buy that information anyway? Because some of them is being bought, I think, from NCIC. Well, we have 2 minutes to wrap it up. Damon, give us a final word, and then Justin, I'll go to you.
Well, I will tell everybody, have a Merry Christmas. I want to end on a good note. We've talked about some good things, some bad things, but let's start off 2014 enjoying life. We're going to celebrate Christmas next Wednesday, buy gifts, eat well. If you can, drink well. But let's start off, let's end the year great, start off 2014 on a good foot.
All right, Justin,
All right.
what's your thought?
Just like the topic of affluenza, Damon stole what I was going to say.
Oh, no, but say it again.
Okay.
No one says it like you.
Well, I wish everyone happy holidays and a Merry Christmas, a great New Year. I do think be safe on the roads. If you've had too much to drink, don't drive. Find somebody else. But if you do get pulled over and you've had anything to drink, or even if you haven't, just remember what your rights are, and that's for not just DWIs, but any kind of case, drug cases. You don't have to let the police into your car, into your home. You just need to remember you're being recorded and just be respectful at all times. And I wish everybody a great New Year, and 2014 is going to be better than the ones before.
That's right.
That's true. And I want to wrap up by saying it's been a great year. We'll have 2 reruns the next 2 Wednesdays of the year. Start off with great programming for you next year. Hopefully we've educated you this year. We've brought you discussions of what's going on in the courthouse, what's going on in criminal law around the state and around the country. I hope I've taught you something. I hope I've educated you about the criminal justice system. I hope I've encouraged you to learn who your judges are and to go out and vote. Our reruns of the show are on YouTube at YouTube/user/Vivian R. King. I'm about 20 shows behind, but by the end of this year, when I take these next 2 weeks off, I'm going to be uploading all of the last 20 shows to YouTube. But I do have 65 shows on YouTube now, so hopefully we'll have about 85 at the end of the year. So thank you for your calls. I don't know what happened with the phone. I think something must have happened with the phone system, because I usually get a lot of calls. I think when that one shut off, I think we had some technical difficulties. But thank you for your support. I hope to see you again in the new year, 2014. And remember, if you have a story, I want to tell your story, so call me. Good night. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. We've been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. We've been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate